Hello and welcome to another installment of Conquering My Collection. The past few videos have been like, hey, here's some films that I bought and watched. Here's my thoughts. We're going to go back to the archives for this one. This is one I pulled off the shelf very randomly. I was having a really rough time this past weekend and I just wanted to go to sleep, just wanted to go to bed, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to go to sleep, so I thought, I'll take a film with me, but what do I want to watch? I don't want to watch anything that's going to try and make me laugh, because I won't laugh. I don't watch anything that's going to make me even more down and like depressed or anything. So I was like, well, what do I go for? I was really just at a loss. I thought I need a night movie. I need something low key, something where there's not much going on, but it's like it's all set at night. Just somewhere I can just let characters wash over me. And just off the shelf, it just popped, and I thought, Jim Jarmusch. And there was one film in this box that I have, which is the Soda Pictures release, just called the Jim Jarmusch collection, which is sadly out of print now. I managed to grab it just before it went out of print. I wish I'd got their Kelly Reichardt collection, because that's woefully out of print now. But this is a box set that includes Permanent Vacation, Stranger Than Paradise, Down by Law, Mystery Train, Night on Earth, and Dead Man. And Night on Earth was the film I wanted to see the most. And usually with me, I want to like start from the beginning. So I remember that when I first got this box set, I started with Permanent Vacation, which is I think his first film, and it didn't grab me in the first 10 minutes, and I ended up like turning it off and thinking I'd go back to it, and I never did. And I'm like, wow, I need to get through like four of the films before I get to Night on Earth. And I thought, fuck it, who cares what order you watch them in? So I just thought, I'm gonna watch Night on Earth. Now, there's no cover to show you, but on the back of the digipack, holding all the discs, we do have one of the characters in the film, played by Giancarlo Esposito, Yo-Yo. And so this Night on Earth is a kind of concept film, an anthology film, to be sure, and a welcome one. So I put on Night on Earth. It's this film about taxi drivers around the world on this one night, this Night on Earth. And we follow these 5 stories of 5 different taxi drivers and their 5 different fares in Los Angeles, New York, Paris, Rome, and Helsinki. It's a very strange combination. Like it makes sense. It makes less sense the more that it goes on. It's like Los Angeles, New York, okay. Paris. Oh, okay. Well, Paris is one of the most famous cities in the world. Rome. Huh. I would have thought London maybe might be on this. Helsinki, like it feels like if it continued on, it would be something like some random like county in I don't know Switzerland or something. But it shows you these 5 stories, and it starts Los Angeles. It's like dusk, and then it very quickly becomes night, and then we don't see dawn again until the very end of the film in Helsinki. And so you open the film with Winona Ryder as Corky, this this is a very short cab driver who like sits on the phone book to kind of to be at the right level of the steering wheel in this massive car, and she's driving to I guess LAX, I'm not sure, but an airport in Los Angeles, and she's dropping off these 2 like kind of like hungover, drunk, stoned, whatever, drug-addled rock stars in the back of her cab, and she drops them off at the airport as the sun is beginning to set, and then the film ends with this drunk in Helsinki just like sitting down on his street in the snow, and there's a few people who are getting up in the morning at 5, and they're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he just sits there, and the film ends. Spoilers. So you have this really interesting book ending of kind of like the energy of the night beginning for this cab driver, and then just the solidarity of this lone drunken man sitting down in the street wondering how he's going to put his life back together again. So that's it. It's these 5 stories. Each is kind of like in the middle. Well, in the middle of each story, we just get this shot of these 5 wall clocks that show you the time in each city, and we move through the night and through the time zones. From dusk until the early hours of the morning. So I guess I'll just give you my thoughts on the 5 stories, and then tell you kind of how I thought the whole thing fit together. But I did love the film. I really did. I had a lot of enjoyment out of it, even though I was in a down mood. And I think it kind of helped. I really picked the right film for myself, I think. So the first story, I'd say is maybe the least dynamic of the 5 in a lot of ways. um, but was almost my favorite because I just loved Winona Ryder's character. This kind of brash, kind of like, this like tomboy. She wants to be a mechanic, and she picks up this kind of prim and proper casting agent, Hollywood casting agent, who's very much kind of like, taken aback by this young girl's kind of very rough attitude, but becomes quickly charmed by her as the cab ride goes on. And that's the thing, like it's a cab ride. It isn't like extended for the point of cinematic purposes. Like it's as long and it's as short or as long as it needs to be each time, and you never get like a full neat resolution of any of this. Because for me, I would have loved to have seen a whole film of these two characters, of Corky and the casting agent woman, but it kind of ends just as it's getting started. And I like that about it because that's what would happen in real life. Like maybe you do find a good rapport with someone when you're in a taxi, whether you're the driver or the passenger. But by the time you get to your destination, like you don't get to kind of continue that on, and that's kind of the way it is sometimes. And what are you going to do? There's people have their lives to live, and the cab drivers have their night to continue. So I really, really enjoyed that first one where they began to feel each other out a bit, like where she's saying you shouldn't smoke so much, and Corky's like, sure, mom, like, very sarcastic and foul mouthed. But it was really sweet. I really enjoyed that first story. And then we move to New York and we find Giancarlo Esposito's character, Yo-Yo. And I'm not going to remember the characters beyond that because Yo-Yo is just a very memorable name along with the other character who picks him up, which is this, I thought it was Russian at first, like he was speaking Russian, I think. But he's this German taxi driver called Helmut, which Yo-Yo kind of says, your Helmut? Your name's Helmut? It's like, Helmut. And this poor German guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He can't even drive a car properly, and he gets to the point where Yo-Yo's like, "Hey, get out, man! I'll drive." He needs to get to Brooklyn, and he just brings so much energy to this, and it's so funny because I literally just like a few hours ago watched the latest episode of Better Call Saul, and Giancarlo Esposito as Gus Fring, such a completely different character, so cold and calculated and prim and proper and to the letter. And then you have Yo-Yo, who's just this manic kind of like, says fuck 8 times a minute kind of guy. And then they pick up Rosie Perez, who is just like this motor mouth, like just explosion of energy and kind of fury. And it's a really fun, it's some fun interplay with the dialogue and stuff. And I'd say Rosie Perez in the end of this New York segment gives one of the best fuck yous I've ever heard. She's like, "Hey, fuck you!" Like it's such a perfect fuck you. It's like venomous but playful at the same time. And it's got real spite behind it, but it's like I don't know. She's great, and I loved all three in this one. It was a really, really fun. It's the most entertaining segment for me of the whole film. The third segment, Paris, is a much different tone. We have an African cab driver who speaks French. Obviously, he came from Africa, the Ivory Coast, and he's dropping off these two very like condescending businessmen who are also black, and they're very much picking on this guy, and he kicks him out, and he's really pissed off. And then he's driving through the streets of Paris in the middle of the night, and he sees this blind woman waiting for a cab. And he literally says to himself, well, this should be a lot easier. And boy, was he wrong. So this blind woman gets in the back, and she is a feisty one. And she's really sure of herself. And he very much naively is kind of saying the wrong things to a blind person. And she's really setting him straight on a lot of those things and kind of giving him some like, giving him a good come to Jesus meeting about like how you should treat blind people, I think. So that was a really good, a different tone, but I kind of really enjoyed it as it continued on. And then the fourth segment in Rome is a complete madcap adventure that feels like out of a different movie altogether, and I love that about it. But we have this Italian cab driver, obviously he's Italian, and apparently the actor improvised a lot of this stuff, but he is just like rattling through these little tiny streets in Rome in the middle of the night, and he's just like he's just monologuing to himself, and he's so full of energy. He's got these shades on in the middle of the night, and he's and he's just going on and on and on. He's speaking all this stuff, and he's just so like soliloquous, if that's even a word. And he picks up this guy who's a priest, and this priest is in the back, and he's like, I need to confess to you, Father. And he's like, no, no, you have to do a confession's anonymous. And he's like, I won't look at you, just let me, I have to get this confession off my chest. And so this guy, this cab driver, gives this full confession of all of his like sexual deviancy throughout his life. And as he's doing this, the priest in the back is getting increasingly distressed, and he's clutching at his chest, and he's got this medication he needs to get, and he's like fumbling with his medication. The guy just keeps on going, and it's one of those, like, it's an absurdist kind of slice slotted into this film, and I quite enjoyed it, even though it's very off color. But again, I really love the kaleidoscope that Jim Jarmusch, and he wrote and directed. Obviously, he directed, but he wrote this film as well. I really love the kaleidoscope of not styles, but feels and tones of each story. They really, I want to say they complemented each other well, but they're all different, and each, no two journey was the same. No two passengers or cab drivers were the same. Different personalities, different clashes of personalities, different messages. Perhaps you could say, like with the Italian, segment, don't overshare so much. The French section, you could say, is, don't judge people so quickly, or be open to understanding people a little bit better. I don't know if there's much you can learn from the New York segment. Well, yeah, in a way, maybe there is. I don't know, maybe a bit more of an understanding for people, in terms of Helmut and his kind of inadequacy in coping with being a cab driver, and how Yo-Yo could have really taken advantage of him but doesn't. And that's kind of an important lesson, to be, to treat people the way you want to be treated, no matter where they come from or what situation they're in. And if you can take advantage of them, don't take it because it's easy, that kind of thing. And maybe the same can be said a little bit from the first segment. But I don't think this was designed as like a five moral tales kind of movie, but I think there is something to learn from each of them. But, for me, it's more just about different tones to enjoy and watch, and see these different characters play off each other. The fifth and final segment was fixing to be like a bit of a, the film kind of puttering off to a finish for me, but it's suddenly turned into maybe the best one of the bunch. So we go to Helsinki, and I don't know how to pronounce this actor's name. It's Matti Pelonpa. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but he's this, I don't know if you call him a famous Finnish actor, but I instantly recognized him. I was like, oh, it's this guy, because he is a very funny character in the 1988 film Ariel by Finnish director Aki Kaurismäki. Don't know if that's how you pronounce his name either, but he's a very famous Finnish director, and this actor is just so recognizable. And apparently this Helsinki section is Jim Jarmusch's kind of like tribute to the films of Aki Kaurismäki. In fact, one of the characters is called Aki. So this Finnish cab driver, he picks up these three drunks. One of them is just blind, passed out, and the other two are kind of fairly rambunctious, and they're saying, oh, our friend, he's had the worst day of his life. He was made redundant. His wife left him. All this stuff has gone on. And the cab driver, and he's with this very distinctive mustache, and the cab driver is just very cold to it all, and he's just like, is that all? Like, and they're like, what? How dare you judge our friend? And they're getting really they're getting their backs up about this. And then this cab driver just lays down this story on them of something he went through that was much worse than what this drunk guy in the back passed out has gone through. Now, I would say what the kind of the unconscious man in the back went through was fairly shitty, but to put things in perspective, and that's maybe the lesson of this one, is to really appreciate what you've got, because there are people who go through things a lot worse. And that is something I think is really important to remember and note a lot of times in your life. But the way the actor Matti, I mean, obviously it's serviced by how gripping the story is, the way that he tells it, but the way that it's shot and the way that we move in closer on his face, not as a movement, but just like it cuts to a closer angle of him, to where we don't even see the other guys anymore. And I'm drawn into this gripping and heartbreaking story, and the way he's delivering it. And then, after a while we cut to the two men, and they're kind of like, yeah, and what happened next? Now their tone has changed. Now they're not the kind of the finger pointing kind of like brash drunken guys anymore. Now they're reeled into this story, to the point where at the end of the cab ride they completely changed their tune because of what they've heard from this man. Just this, it's an incredible moment, and it's heartbreaking, and beautifully delivered, beautifully written. And it makes tears form in my eyes now as I think about it, and that I think is the beauty of this film, is that it's a fun ride with kind of these fun characters in Los Angeles and New York, and then it's a lesson in kind of like understanding people in France, and then Rome, just this absurdist tale. There's this very kind of slapstick in a sense. This little tiny car whizzing around these small alleys in Rome, and there's a recurring couple in the Rome section who are just like fucking throughout the city. and that's another thing I loved about the film. I'll finish off that thought, and then where we end it is this really poignant, sweet, and emotional moment, and there's a real resonance to it. And I think the way that it ends with that, the unconscious guy kind of waking up and kind of like literally crawling out onto the street and just sitting there in the snow as the sun begins to rise on another day. I think now I've talked about this is interesting. Now that I've talked about it, I think this is like a 5-star film for me. I really loved everything about it, and it is like a life of. And that's one of the things that I love about Jim Jarmusch. I've only seen a few of his films. I've seen Patterson, which I absolutely loved. I've seen The Dead Don't Die, which is one of the funniest films I've seen in years. I saw that in the cinema and was just giggling to myself the whole time, and it absolutely tanked. No one in the cinema got it or enjoyed it. There was just no laughs whatsoever. No one found it funny, and I'm just sat there just giggling throughout the whole thing. Because it felt like British humor, very dry, sardonic, sarcastic stuff. But that's why I got the box set, was to, once I saw The Dead Don't Die and Patterson, I wanted to see more of his stuff. And Night on Earth is just, it feels like his kind of slice of life thing, but there is a message underneath it that I really enjoyed by the end of it. So I love the way it begins. I love the way that it ends, and I think there's some interesting stuff in the middle. I do think the Italian one is my least favorite because it's I don't know. It's not quite my favorite. I guess I don't know. It is funny, but then again, now that I'm talking about it, I find it funny because I'm not in the down mood I was when I watched the film. And I remember there was a few funny things, even in the finish segment, there was a few funny moments. I remember kind of going like, huh. But I couldn't let myself fully be amused because I wasn't in a very good mood and I was very down. So I think that now I'm talking about it, I think that it would please me even more on a rewatch in a better mood, So yeah, I really loved this film. And yeah, so finally, the one other thing I loved about the film, all shot on location. All done. I mean, it's kind of unheard of. This isn't like a big studio film. I don't know how he got the funding for this, but good on him for doing it, because it feels real. It feels authentic. We go to different countries. It's all It's not like we see French people kind of speaking in a French accent in English or anything like that. We get the authentic languages and the subtitles, and everything feels as real as it can. I mean, you're watching a movie and everything, but like seeing the actual streets of Paris in the middle of the night, seeing the actual streets of Rome, Helsinki, New York and Los Angeles, more familiar locations in kind of mainstream American movies, but there's such a authenticity that comes from like the not establishing shots, but like the scenery shots, which occur throughout the film, and it's very nicely paced and written and edited that way, because it's not like the cab driver picks up a passenger and then you're inside the cab for like the next 25 minutes. There'll be like lulls in the conversation, which are broken up beautifully by just like, we'll see the car driving past and then we'll just see like bits of the city, just very nice shots, like very nicely framed and composed. And you get just like the sense of this city being not so much alive, but this city sleeping, and this city dormant. And you get a feel of these like grimy back streets, or like, the bridges of New York as they head over to Brooklyn, or Brookland as Helmut called it. Just seeing like different shots of LA that show like the grimier side or the more glamorous side, and you just get these nice, like, they famously called pillow shots in the works of Ozu, where he would punctuate these kind of these family drama moments with just like, we cut outside the house for a bit just to look at like the chimney, and we get a breather from this kind of intense family discussion. Then we come back. It's that kind of mentality where you just kind of get this breather, and it's a really nice breather, and you can kind of reflect on what you've just seen, and then and it's kind of what happens in cab rides and in car rides, where you'll be engaged in conversation, you know, and then kind of there's a lull, you know, and then so anyway, like, you know, and it just felt so natural in that sense. I love those breaks, and just seeing those streets and seeing those little tiny moments, and little, you know, again, streets and buildings and alleys and, you know, locations. I loved all that stuff. So yeah, no, it's nice to talk about this film, and now say that I would rate it as a 5-star film, and probably put it in my, like, you know, among my favorite films. I think I really loved it. It lived up to the hype I had within it for myself, and I definitely, like, 'cause I love Winona Ryder. I really love her, so I knew that I was gonna like her segment, and I really did. And I was going in thinking, I wish she was in the whole movie, and then I felt like I wish, like, Yo-Yo was in the whole movie. I didn't feel like that about the other three, like the European segments, but the way that it plays out, having seen it, the whole, like, two plus hour movie, you know, I just love the way that it's, and even as I was watching the film, I thought, oh, maybe this would work out better if you put some of the segments, if you mix them up a bit. And I realized that was such a, you know, a useless thing to think while you're watching a movie. And I really disliked myself for thinking that, because by the time we got to the end, I realized how perfectly it was structured. You know, start off really fun, we get even more fun, and then we bring it down a bit, like a bit more serious. You know, it's a little bit of fun, but a bit more serious. There's, you know, there's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek stuff, and then we go to Rome, and it's just like really, really silly. And then we bring you back down to reality a little bit. There's still some humor, but we have this message at the end, you know, to really value what you've got, because there's always someone who's got it a little bit worse than you. So it isn't all bad, and the sun will always rise on another day, you know, no matter how shitty things are. So I loved it, thought it was great. Let me know if you've seen it. Let me know any thoughts you have on any of Jim Jarmusch's films. Obviously without spoiling anything, I suppose, but I tried to not spoil some of the more key elements, like what the story was in that final, you know, segment. But I think describing it might make me emotional just in saying it, so maybe that's for the best. But if you haven't seen it and you've watched this far, what are you doing? Go try and find it and check it out. The ones that I'm intrigued to see the most now are probably Dead Man, because Johnny Depp, who I'm quite a fan of, and then Mystery Train is one that I've heard quite a few things about from people I know. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.